Hey guys, I'm here for my third ShakeTube video. It's actually Saturday right now. It's the day after we all posted our videos about Richard III. But just yesterday I finished Romeo and Juliet. I didn't really have time to record my video, for various reasons. I think everyone basically knows the story of Romeo and Juliet, so I don't really feel like I need to give much of an introduction to it. But I read this play for the first time when I was probably 15. I was probably a freshman in high school, and basically, I just remember at least all the guys in my class tended to just kind of make fun of it, and being a teenager, I just tended to kind of go along with that. So I didn't have much of a serious experience with it, although I do remember a lot of what my teacher said about it, which is interesting because I was a terrible student when I was a freshman in high school. So I don't know why I listened so closely to what the teacher had to say about this play, but a lot of time what she had said about it kind of was echoing in my mind, and yeah, so anyway, I was a bit apprehensive just because when I first experienced it, I just kind of wasn't that into it. But no, I really loved it. Maybe it's still not as much as Richard III, but that would be topping a big. I really loved Richard III, so for Romeo and Juliet to top it would be a big accomplishment. Yeah, I mean, the language, of course, is beautiful, but despite knowing how it ended, I still felt so much suspense. You know, especially towards the end, of course, but that was just crazy, and I don't know, I also was still very moved by the end again, even though I knew what was going to happen. And I think it's probably a function both of Shakespeare's language and also just experiencing just how everything was timed so perfectly for everything to end disastrously in this play. And, I mean, that's a big part of the tragedy. That's one of the big things that my teacher, when I was a freshman, talked about. But yeah, I wanted to just give a few random thoughts that I had about the characters. So, partway through the play, I was thinking it was possible that Romeo fell in love more with Juliet's beauty than with Juliet herself. I don't know, I looked at what he was saying, and he made so many references to, how she looked, sort of as though it was, what he valued in her, and I don't know what to do with that. I mean, certainly physical attractiveness is still highly valued by teenagers, I think, and by people in general, but I don't know if that's like something I could sustain if I were to do a closer analysis of the play, but I did get a bit of that sense, and but you know, I think Juliet is my favorite character in the play. I know that the two characters who tend to kind of steal the show in this play are Mercutio and the nurse, and I enjoyed them too, but Juliet, I think, is very interesting. She's much more interesting, I think, than Romeo, because you see more of her internal struggle, more so. Romeo isn't one-dimensional, but he basically falls in love with Juliet and just does everything that he does sort of in service to that. Juliet, on the other hand, is a bit more conflicted. You know, Romeo kills Tybalt, and she even has a brief moment where she, like, curses Romeo, and that just added a bit of a layer to her character that isn't there with Romeo. And she also I think being a woman faces a bigger challenge than Romeo. The essay in the back of my edition is by Gail Kern-Pastor, who I know nothing about, but he, I think, makes an interesting... He does an interesting analysis of the play, where he looks at it as sort of at least in part, about the tension between older ideas of identity and how young people found identity, and how it was kind of just expected that you would, it would be through your family and your family's loyalties, versus the sort of newer, more humanistic Enlightenment idea of identity, which was more individualistic, where you found yourself. And so he looks at the Romeo and Juliet's romance as their sort of way of trying to find that. But he also talks about how for Juliet, that is a much more daring rebellion, because she's a woman, and because women were basically supposed to be, they were supposed to get married to whomever their father told them to, and that was, that was basically the center of their life. And so for her to, sort of rebel by marrying a guy she wanted to rather than her father, it's a much bigger rebellion than Romeo. So I thought that was an interesting analysis of the play. You don't have to necessarily look at it through that sort of feminist perspective, but I mean, I think that's still an interesting analysis. So yeah, and I liked that idea of the play as looking at the search for identity and its tension with older ideas of identity, because I feel like it made the themes a bit more universal. That's not just relevant to a love story, it's relevant to, LGBT people searching for identity, or, kind of people who are unsure of their identity because of being of an intersectional identity of some sort, like being, half black and half Latino or something like that. And just one last note, anyway, when Juliet is kind of going into crisis mode after she finds out about after she is told by her father that she needs to marry Paris, and she goes to the nurse and then to the friar, kind of in a huff, saying like, "Help me or I'm gonna kill myself." I just couldn't help but think of all of the parents or just adults in the lives of teenagers, or just friends of people who were kind of in some kind of a crisis mode like that. And I just couldn't help but feel for the friar and the nurse, because that situation where someone comes up to you and says something like that is so stressful. I haven't necessarily directly experienced something that intense, but like, I have been in something similar to it-ish, and I can also just imagine it happening, and just, finding it so hard to, figure out what to say to this kid. Or it doesn't have to be a kid, but like, still, even worse when they're a kid. So I really felt for the friar and the nurse when they were trying to deal with Juliet in her dramatic, I don't know what I'm trying to say, in her crisis. I've said the word crisis like 10 times, but I just really felt for the nurse and the friar in those scenes where Juliet was kind of freaking out to them, so and I think that's so relatable, because that still happens. That's just something that happens with teenagers and young people in general sometimes. So yeah, those were my thoughts. I did really end up enjoying this a lot. And just to end, Curtis last week for Richard III read a passage from Richard III. So and I liked I liked that. I liked the idea of kind of reading my favorite passage from each play, so I think I'm going to try to do that for every play from now on. That's because I like reading poetry. And I was going to start posting videos where I read poetry, and I haven't done that yet. But anyway, I'm just going to read a passage that I underlined. It's, I'm not saying it's like the best passage, it's just a passage that, that when I read it, I was like, I would enjoy reading this, so, that's what I'm gonna base what I read off of, not off of whether it's like the best passage or the most important passage. I'm just gonna read what, what first strikes me, I guess. So anyway, it's, when Romeo opens the tomb and finds, Juliet lying there. So the stage directions, whoa, okay. Sorry, we had a bit of a, crisis with the cat knocking down the camera, so sorry if the perspective changed. Romeo has just opened the tomb and seen Juliet. So he goes, "A grave? Oh no. A lantern, slaughtered youth, for here lies Juliet, and her beauty makes this vault a feasting presence full of light. Death, lie thou there, by a dead man interred." Then he lays Paris in the tomb. "How oft when men are at the point of death, have they been merry, which their keepers call a lightning before death? Oh, how may I call this a lightning? O my love, my wife, death, that hath sucked the honey of thy breath, hath had no power yet upon thy beauty. Thou art not conquered. Beauty's ensign yet is crimson in thy lips and in thy cheeks, and death's pale flag is not advanced there. Tybalt, liest thou there in thy blood sheet? Oh, what more favour can I do to thee than with that hand that cut thy youth in twain to sunder his that was thine enemy? Forgive me, cousin. Ah, dear Juliet, why art thou yet so fair? Shall I believe that unsubstantial death is amorous, and that the lean, abhorred monster keeps thee here in dark to be his paramour? For fear of that, I still will stay with thee, and never from this palace of dim night depart again. Here will I remain, with worms that are thy chambermaids. Oh, here will I set up my everlasting rest, and shake the yoke of inauspicious stars from this world-wearied flesh. Eyes, look your last. Arms, take your last embrace. And lips, O you, the doors of breath, seal with a righteous kiss a dateless bargain to engrossing death." And then he kisses Juliet. "Come, bitter conduct, come, unsavory guide, thou desperate pilot, now at once run on the dashing rocks thy seasick weary bark. Here is to my love. O true apothecary, thy drugs are quick, thus with a kiss I die." So yeah, I like that. I'm sorry for my couple of stumbles, but I hope it was a satisfactory reading. So yeah, anyway, I did end up really enjoying this, so yeah. So next week we are reading Julius Caesar, which I'm actually going to begin today, so yeah, thank you guys, bye!